And so we intentionally mess with people's minds a little bit to be able to address some of those issues. One of those is sort of the structure of our actual gatherings on Sunday nights at 6 o'clock. We intentionally will mess with people in certain ways in terms, we're rut phobic in what we do. We're afraid of sort of doing things exactly the same way and to be predictable. Not that liturgy is bad. I really appreciate liturgy. But to be able to mess with people to say, I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but I anticipate God will show up in a new way and He will meet me here. And sometimes that means I just jump up right at 6 o'clock and go, hey, good evening, open your Bibles, we're going to jump into teaching right away. Or it may mean we try different things. Sometimes we wipe out the chairs. And I know this auditorium, sanctuary, we can't do that. But we'll wipe out the chairs and people walk in and go, where do I sit? And I go, on the floor. Where else would you sit with no chairs? And they would say, I didn't know I was allowed to sit on the floor in church. And so we intentionally mess with people even in the structure, even in some of the architecture, just as a way of not being mean, but of saying, let's learn about some values here that either we have intentionally or unintentionally integrated, and then let's talk about if those are positive or if those are negative. And so one time we were teaching on silence and solitude and the importance of that, and I thought as I'm preparing, it seems counterintuitive for me to talk and make noise if I'm talking about silence. And so I stood up and I stared at people for 20 minutes during my teaching. And then I had PowerPoint slides teach for me. You should have seen the panicked look on people's faces as I was just staring at them up there for 20 minutes. Now, why did I do that? Because people came up to me later and said, I had no idea that you could teach in church. You could preach a sermon without words. Of course you can. Some of those things we try to mess with the structure of the service itself so as to use that as the teaching tool. And we say, why? Why do we have to do it a certain way? And so those are just a few things. The other thing is the architecture piece. Sometimes we ask the question, okay, where are the lights in the room? Where are the microphones located? Is something elevated? Is something lowered? Platforms? And that isn't bad. We have a similar setup at the front of our auditorium as well. But we say, wow, oftentimes where the lights are and where the microphones are up front. As if to say, the experts will deal with it, and the commoners need to just sit down, shut up, and listen. We try to level the playing field. Sometimes we sit in the round. Sometimes we wipe out chairs, like I mentioned. Sometimes we have microphones throughout, and kind of like a Jerry Springer Geraldo. We don't have fights break out or anything like that. But as a way of allowing people to say, okay, let's dialogue about this. Okay, rather than just listening passively, how can we be active participants together in helping shape who we are as a faith community? And so those are a few things. As we think about mission and being designed in mission, as we're talking this morning, obviously we think of Matthew 28 and the Great Commission. One of the things we've thrown around a lot. Dallas Willard talks about the Great Commission and says, what makes it great? It is the commission. Great or not, that is our only commission. That's what we're called to do. He sort of knocks the legs out of that term we have, the Great Commission, to remind us that is the commission, period. You add an adjective if you want, but that's what we're called to do. And Christopher Wright actually has done a ton of writing on this idea of mission, and it's really messed with us. And we actually talked about this last week at Resonate. This definition that Christopher Wright has, he says that it's a committed participation at God's invitation and command to join God in the world. I love that phrase, that committed participation at God's invitation and command to do His work in the world. Now, I'm not doing my job as a pastor if I'm not helping my people understand that it is a committed participation of all of us together. And so that sort of helps us a little bit understand as a faith community. Even last week I used this analogy. Todd and I have a friend named Tom who's a church planter down in Delaware. And if you ask Tom about his faith community, he'll tell you, if you say, tell me about your church, what you're doing, he'll say, we're a community that's attempting to be Jesus-ish. I love that description, and I've asked him if I can use that, and I've used it a ton. What a perfect description of being designed in mission. That if my people get that the 6 other days of the week, if they can be Jesus-ish, they're in committed participation with God in what He's doing in the week. in the week ahead. What a fabulous thing. So what I'm just going to give 3 unique elements, and then I'm going to let Todd speak. 3 unique elements in terms of how we're wired up at Resonate, in terms of our structure. Again, we're just a year and a half old. We're just in our infancy. We're learning how to walk, if not crawl, right now. So we're still trying to figure out who we are, what we're trying to be, who we're not. But I think 3 unique elements we've tried to embed in the DNA, insert in the ethos of what we're doing, that are extremely important. One of the things is, I think an important element is unlearning. People say, what are you learning as a faith community? And I say, you know what? That's a graduate level question. We're in the undergrad department right now trying to unlearn unhealthy and inaccurate practices. We're trying to unlearn what mission is not before we can even learn what mission is. And so that's been an interesting journey, and I think people, after a year and a half, it's been slow, but I think people are just now learning and understanding what mission is not in some specific areas. And we've got to acknowledge that and untangle some of those things. And because they're deeply embedded in terms of how we do things. We just have sort of accepted things as they are for quite some time now. And that's okay, but we've got to answer the why. And so we've sort of questioned a lot as a way of saying, how do we be this movement rather than this place that has a service once a week?